Just so we're clear about this, I am never consistent with where I want my shit to be. Hello my lovely viewers of the World Wide Web, welcome back to the TheJackedex show, and especially welcome back to the Summer of Marathons, and I welcome you to the year of 2017. And today, to kickstart off our very first video for this year, we're going to take a look at the Blue Blur's legacy on the SEGA CD, namely, Sonic CD. Let's take a look. The SEGA CD is quite the interesting console. It's the kind that has always eluded me in terms of what kind of games were made for the system, but that's mostly because I honestly don't know about the console that much. From what I know and read on the internet, the SEGA CD is a Genesis add-on that allowed players to play CD-based games on their Genesis and or Mega Drive. And from what I hear, the console was quite expensive for its time and it had a huge library of full-motion video games. And it was one of those games that had a lot of movie experience interactivity between itself and the player. And because of that huge abundance of FMV games and the fact that the library of games for the system lacked any real depth, the console drove itself into a brick wall more times than Mario gets cock-blocked by Bowser's princess kidnapping. Still, the Sonic team wanted the Blue Blur to get a slice of that higher quality sound and graphical finesse action, and so the guy who practically gave birth to the speedy marsupial decided he would be the director of his new baby, Sonic CD. Now from what I gathered during the development process of the game, originally both Sonic 2 and Sonic CD were conceived to be one game. But since CD had evolved into an entirely new entity that featured a different storyline, new characters, and a branch of new stages, Sonic CD became a plot based around time travel and rescuing the ever-cute, but slightly yandere acting schoolgirl, Amy Rose, from Sonic's alter ego and more terrifyingly robotic duplicate, Metal Sonic. Now what made Sonic CD stand out from its original counterparts was its design direction. The two ports that were released for European, Japanese audiences, and American audience having two soundtracks and animated cutscenes. The animated cutscenes were created, in collaboration with Studio Junior, by the world-famous Toei Animation, the same people who you may recognize worked on the 1990s Sailor Moon, Digimon, and the ever-going and never-ending One Piece. Why is this show still going? So the game was completed, and Naoto Oshima gave birth to one of the greatest 2D platformers of the modern age, seeing critical acclaim from critics who enjoyed the time travel gameplay, the graphical presentation, and the music. Now before I go ahead with the analysis part of this review, I need to mention the Christian Whitehead re-release that came out for iOS in 2011. See, Christian Whitehead, as some of you Sonic fans may already know, started out as a freelance 3D animator before working on a proof of concept for the iPhone, which showed a working Sonic CD port that he created using a custom engine called the Retro Engine. Now ever since then, he also worked on two other Sonic ports for the iPhone, and eventually this guy would become one of the lead programmers for the upcoming Sonic Mania. And because I love to show support for the upcoming mainstream project, I'm going to be reviewing the Steam port, which adds additional content, the ability to play as Tails, and a graphical filter which allows nostalgic, smooth, or sharp presentation graphics. Oh, and don't forget the soundtrack. I'll be including a link to a YouTube channel that has both the Japanese and American soundtracks for you to listen to after I sample you a few through this review. So with that, let's begin our story. Presumably after the events of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, according to the very recently released Archie Comics issue, only $2.50 at your local comic store, Sonic decides to visit the fabled Never Lake for the arrival of a tiny mini world that only appears every 1 month. The name of this mysterious object is known as Little Planet, and within Little Planet holds the mythical Time Stones, the not Chaos Emeralds of Little Planet. However, upon arriving to Never Lake, the once beautiful microplanet is shown to be covered entirely out of metal and chained to an ever so subtle image of Teddy Roosevelt. I mean Dr. Robotnik. Sonic decides to investigate the matter, and a couple of times during the game, he comes across the young Amy Rose, a perky, optimistic schoolgirl who I claim to be a yandere because she makes a living throughout the majority of the games pointlessly chasing Sonic about trying to get him to date her, but instead of a knife, she wields a hammer. That's like twice as dangerous. She claims to be at Little Planet because of a fortune-telling tarot card prediction that revealed to her that she would meet the love of her life, but it's not until she gets kidnapped by Metal Sonic that she holds any real relevance to the rest of the plot. But it's not Amy that Sonic is worried about, it's the fact that Metal Sonic is supposedly faster than he is. So as it stands, defeat Dr. Robotnik, beat up Metal Sonic, rescue Amy, save the planet from disaster. The story is by no means a terrible one. I enjoy the idea of being able to travel to another world and exploring the more funkier and jazzier levels that these stages are designed with. I mean, you take one look at any of these stages and you can instantly tell that there's a 1990s futuristic anime kind of feel to it. It kind of reminds me of Dragon Ball Z in some of its aesthetics, which actually shouldn't surprise me since Sonic borrows elements from Dragon Ball Z like a motherfucker. On that point, when are we going to get a Sonic equivalent to Super Saiyan 3? Is that still in consideration? Yes? No? Possibly? Yeah, I'm getting off track here. Presentation-wise, this game is fucking gorgeous for a 16-bit game. Since this was developed with a CD-based format in mind, you can bet your bottom dollar they went to great length to make this one of the most eye-catching, imaginative looking games with beautiful set pieces, excellent color choices, the aesthetics especially in terms of the backdrop items, environmental set pieces, and the various amounts of enemies all have a distinct feel, and it's absolutely wonderful to look at. Palm Tree Panic is a luscious green hill zone with palm trees, lakes, mountains, and a copious amount of caves and slopes that make exploring this pleasant hillside a joy. Collision Chaos is kind of like Casino Night Zone from Sonic 2. It doesn't have the gambling machines per se, but it does have a healthy amount of bumpers, flippers, long drops, and slopes that reward the player greater goodies and power-ups when they use the various springs and items to their advantage. It's also the first stage where you encounter Metal Sonic for the first time, and while I can't speak for Sonic when I say this, that little motherfucker is one stingy cockblocker. Tidal Tempest is Labyrinth Zone again, but I find this one to be a little bit more bearable in terms of structure. For one, if you remain on the bottom half of the level, you're pretty much stuck there until you find a tube or a spring to reach the surface, and even then, the surface only covers about 20% of the levels. Quartz Quadrant is like a giant emerald, or in this case, quartz mining facility that is filled to the brim with conveyor belts and springs. I actually find it a lot of fun using the little switch mechanic on these conveyor belts to manipulate the direction and using that to my advantage to build up speed or when I need to travel through time, which yeah, I'll get to in just a moment. Wacky Workbench is like a work-in-progress trampoline factory, and while there aren't any trampolines in this place, certain glowing parts of the floor allow the player to jump extremely high into upper areas, and with it comes a lot of potential to find secrets, but also a bit of frustration when you're just trying to reach the goal with trying to hit the ceiling several times, but I'll get to that when I get to that. Stardust Speedway is my favorite level in the game. It's a giant highway filled to the brim with loop-de-loops, chaotic routes, and passageways, and there's even this fun little tube-based area in Act 2 that reminds me of Tube Electra from Jazz Jackrabbit 2. Has anyone else played that game? Anyways, it's also where you'll face Metal Sonic in a one-to-one race to reach the end of the goal while outrunning Dr. Robotnik's insta-kill death laser. Which begs the question as to why he doesn't use this kind of weapon in all of his inventions in the future. Finally, we have Metallic Madness. Honestly, it reminds me a lot of Metropolis Zone and Scrap Brain Zone. I mean, they are the final stages of the game, they dish out all the punches, the level design on the rare occasion can get a little dickish. Honestly, all I have to say is, oh my god, would you look at that? It's a chibi Sonic running at Mach speed! Holy crap! I need a toy made out of this! Can we do that? Can we make a toy chibi Sonic from Sonic CD, please? I'll give you a shout out! Seriously though, the chibi Sonic section is small, but enough to qualify a sense of minor difference, I guess. I don't know, in terms of gameplay, you're just smaller and a little bit more slipperier in terms of control, so it's a little annoying. But it's done and dusted in about a minute, so it's nothing to really lose your lunch over. I'm glad that the level design has maintained a lot of what Sonic 2 built upon from the first game, taking the elements that worked in terms of level structure and character design, and implementing those designs to create fun, challenging, rewarding experiences that I think players can get a kick out of. Of course, there will be times when some levels can get a bit tricky, and very rarely will you need to backtrack to try and take an alternative route, and I say that as a minor flaw. See, one of the big issues I have with this game is where certain backdrop items like bumpers and springs are placed. There's always that small chance that while I'm trying to maneuver my way through the level, I unintentionally get bounced back or stuck in an area that requires me to break apart these giant orbs, and that constantly breaks my progress down. And it's not just level gimmicks. Sometimes it's just levels in general that'll base its design around trying to keep me from going straight forward and reach the goal. Wacky Workbench especially is guilty of that. It's the rarest of times in the Sonic game where I wish I want to stick to the bottom and not have to use the platforms to reach the end of the stage. So if I have to use them, I'm practically going at a snail's pace. And on top of that, there's traps and dangerous ice freezing machines that constantly halt whatever platforming I'm trying to do, and I have to make it clear that this doesn't make it game breaking. It's just a bit of an annoyance that stops me from enjoying some of these levels as a whole. But to make up for that, we have these time traveling posts. And if you recall from earlier that I've mentioned the time stones, but I also forgot to mention that one of the things you can do to get a good ending is to travel back in time and destroy these robot capsules or holographic metal Sonic generators that pop up in the past. But in order to get to the past, we need to build up some speed. And if you have the ability to warp through time via the use of just racing past these posts, you'll notice that Sonic's body starts to glow. And if you manage to maintain that for a few seconds while going at 88 miles per hour,
you're gonna see some serious shit.
Before I forget though, I want to bring up a new ability that Sonic now has called the Super Peel Out. By holding up and pressing jump, Sonic can build up a super speedy charge to allow him to accelerate at full speed when the player lets go of the up button. This makes being able to time travel more easier, but that doesn't mean you'll be able to travel through time quickly. No matter what speed you're going at, you still need to keep it consistent for a few seconds before you can actually initiate time travel. Mess up even once, and you'll have to find another future or past post to try again. Which I do give credit to the game for once again emphasizing the earning skill for better reward aspect of the game. But I cannot tell you how many times it can be infuriating just seeing Sonic get closer and closer to traveling through time when, bam! Suddenly a giant wall or a slope halts his progress and I gotta run around and look for another post. It's just, When you do finally reach the past or the future, not only does the level aesthetic and environment change, some small little changes in level structure also change. When you travel to the past, you can see all of the peaceful, serene, and oftentimes the in progress kind of environments that show factories or cities being built under construction. It's also the part of the game where you have to search out the robot generators and destroy them, and they can be hidden pretty tricky if you don't know the layout of the level very well. This is actually something I wholeheartedly welcome. Yeah, it can be frustrating trying to go out of your way to destroy these things after spending God knows how many minutes trying to find them, but this is what I believe holds a strong relevance to the player's determination by testing their skills to see if they're able to create good futures for each of the zones while collecting the time stones. The ending cutscene helps illustrate how much the player has achieved for their efforts. Of course, if you ever do go into the future without altering the past at all, you do get to see the ramifications of your actions. In the bad future, everything is pretty messed up. The water is polluted, machines dominate the environment, everything is muddy and dark. You feel the desolate tone once you realize how much you messed up by not saving the planet through specific means. However, the robot capsules aren't particularly necessary to getting a good ending. What you will need is the time stones, and that's where the special stages come in. By collecting 50 rings and jumping into this giant ring at the end of every stage, you're transported to a 3D plane kind of looking place where you need to destroy these UFOs as quickly as you can before time runs out. The stages are all shaped like a race course, but like any other stage, there's hazards and obstacles which can make or break your attempts depending on how you play. You have dash panels, giant fans, springs, but you also have giant floor hazards and water, which reduces time the longer you tread on it. If you happen to go below 20 seconds on the clock, a special blue UFO with red lights will appear in the middle of the stage to give you 30 additional seconds should you need it to complete the level with extended time. Collect all 7 of the time stones and you have officially saved the little planet from disaster. Now the boss fights in this game I think are a little bit more creative than Sonic 2. It still suffers from easy as fuck strategies, but on the rare occasion, you do have to think a little outside the box and consider what kind of moves to use against the flabby doctor. And if you've collected the time stones, or if you manage to achieve a good future in previous zones, the boss zone will have a good future aesthetic. For example, in Palm Tree Panic's Bad Future, Robotnik has this walking bumper robot thing which you can destroy pretty easily by standing to the right and hitting him a couple of times, but in the good future, the colors change to what the fuck?
Hello! I'm feeling fabulous! Oh Jesus, you've gone and destroyed my pimp ride! Fuck! Now I gotta get my stupid duplicate robot to destroy you. See you later, you stupid bitch.
As I said before, if you manage to expose the weak points of Robotnik's weapons, you can take them out pretty easily. But let me tell you, it's no swift task. See, when I was younger and I played this, I never really knew how to approach these guys because of how vague the design was. But after thinking a little like a cartoon character, or just by means of experimentation, depends on your perception, I found bosses like the conveyor belt boss to be quite creative and almost kind of funny in how it visually shows Dr. Robotnik pissing his pants with worry about how the platform he's standing on is slowly scraping off and starts to burn at his feet. That was really funny to watch when I was a kid. One thing I have to compliment the bosses on in this game though is the music. The soundtrack in this game is fucking amazing! Actually, let me iterate that. The Japanese soundtrack, in my opinion, is the better constructed, more memorable, fun, bouncy, and consistently toe-tappingly entertaining in the series. It has music that ranges from J-pop to techno, orchestra to rock. It has a large library of music genres that all fit the tone of each of these stages. Like, just listen to these samples. Now, the American version doesn't suck by any means. I think it's pretty solid by its own right. And I do kind of like American versions to Japanese counterpart stages a lot more better. Here's my problem with the American version though. A lot of it stems from very little in terms of genre. Most of the stage music is mainly just rock and pop, and while I like those genres fine, I think the soundtrack needed more variety, but it plays it a bit too safely. However, I will say that the best song out of the American soundtracks, again in my opinion, and I think you guys could already see this coming, is Sonic Boom from the beginning. It's a catchy song, it has an upbeat epic musical structure, and the lyrics are easy to get into. So by the end of the day, Sonic CD is a fantastic 2D platforming experience with solid gameplay, awesome graphics, and an amazing soundtrack. The remaster especially is one of the series' most recommended and loved titles for its additional content, graphical settings, and replayability. However, if you guys still aren't sold on the idea of Sonic CD for the PC, PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360, all I have to say is give it a go yourselves. I can say without a doubt that Sonic CD is among my favorite 2D platforming titles, and it never ceases to surprise me and keep me entertained whenever I need to get my mind off things, or just need to have some good old 2D platforming fun to ease my troubles. That is, if I'm not playing Super Mario World, Rayman, or Rondo of Blood to keep me entertained. And that was Sonic CD for the SEGA CD, folks. Now the next time we meet, we're going to be taking a look at 2 games, but for 1 review. For you see, we're going to be taking a look at Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic & Knuckles in 1 full package. For you see, the 2 games were originally supposed to be 1 game called Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Or maybe it was originally supposed to be called Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and the point is, they had to split it up. And the reasons for that I will deal with when we go into the next video. And then afterwards, I hope to go back into the world of comic books for one of the most highly recommended stories that you guys have commented me to do for a long time. And we're going to take a look at the Sonic Quest saga before we finish it up with the Endgame saga. Until then, take care of yourselves, have a good evening, and as always, stay awesome, lovely viewers. I'll see you all next time. So the game was completed and Naoto Oshima gave birth to one of the great... On that point, when are we going to get a Sonic equivalent to Sonic... On that point, when are we going to get a Sonic equivalent... On that point, when... Why is this line so hard to say? You can bet your bottom dollar they went to great... Oh, shit. You can bet your Oh, shit. For example, in Palm Tree Panic Span... Yeah. For example, in Palm Tree... This is so hard to say.